Welcome back, everybody, to me talking about good books, sort of, at least a bit. By which I mean Discworld. It's time to continue the great Discworld read-along that I started about a year ago. No, a bit more than a year, less than a year ago. Anyway, point is, we're sort of up to speed, almost. By which I mean, time to talk about Maskerade, book 18 in publication order, and that means that our next book that we'll be discussing in a laid-back, nice Zoom call or other video call next Sunday, most likely, will be number 19, Feet of Clay, another City Watch book. And if you want to join us for that one, which I highly recommend, join the Unabridged Burners Discord server and you'll learn all the details there. We have us a channel for that kind of thing there. I'd be very happy to see you there. If not, just watch these videos. I'm also very thankful for that. If you're new here, I also am very happy that you're here. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for watching the video. Like, subscribe, do all those wonderful things. I do appreciate it a lot. And not to take it for too long, I want to give a cheers and thank you to one of my Patreon backers, my patrons. A new one or a recurring one, whoever. This one goes out to Luciana. I hope I pronounced that not too badly. Anyway, thanks for being a backer. I really, really appreciate it. This one's for you. Cheers. All right, so let's have us a bit of a talk about Maskerade, book 18. It's a witch's book, sort of, and other things. And it's not one of my favorites. I don't think it succeeds very well at what Terry Pratchett is doing here. And I'm trying to find out what that is. What with Interesting Times also not being that good of a book, the question is, have we hit a slump or anything? Like, I do like the next one a lot more. And I think it's interesting to look at this part of Terry Pratchett's career, this part of the Discworld writing and the things he's trying to do, and why maybe this one doesn't work so well. But let's have us a quick summary of events, and afterwards we'll go into the spoilers. What's this book about? It's about young Agnes Nitt trying to become an opera singer, struggling with those kind of things, while at the opera house there's a ghost, and the ghost is maybe killing people, maybe not, and other stuff. And at the same time, two witches, that is Nanny Ogg and Granny Weatherwax, wander down from Lancre, where Agnes Nitt is originally from as well, and coming to Ankh-Morpork as well to find, well, mostly to get money that Nanny Ogg is owed by the publisher of her cookbook, and to meddle in the affairs of Agnes and the opera house, because they need a third witch, because, Magrat Garlic ended up being queen after the last book. So, fun abounds, as they say. It's something of a crime novel, it's something of a parody of opera, and, Phantom of the Opera, and other stuff. And it's still worth reading, is what I'm saying. It's not super problematic, like, the stuff that we talked about last time with Interesting Times, but there's better Discworld novels out there. Anyway, you can go and read it. It's like 300 pages or thereabouts, and then you can come back and, join me when I ramble about this thing. Right? Glad you're back. I hope you enjoyed the book. Let's start. So, why does this one not work so well for me? I think a big part is that Terry Pratchett is always at his best when he tackles subjects that he has a vested interest in, that he has personal, feelings about, and that he likes. And that is why other books that are fairly close parodies of a specific subject, like, moving pictures or soul music, worked so well. Because it felt like Terry Pratchett was talking about something that he knows things about and that he loves. This one doesn't really, that much. It feels like Terry Pratchett is dealing with opera and slightly related to it, the class issues and stuff that are related with, like, the production of art. but it doesn't feel like his heart is in it that much, and that makes it a bit, less fun to read to me. But then again, I can't blame the man. He wrote like over 40 novels. There'll be some in there that I will not be, super happy with, because, and I thought about it, like, is it because I don't like opera? It's like, you know what? I've been to a bunch of operas. I've seen a couple of operas in my day. I have pretended to know what I'm talking about with these kind of things. I've been in opera houses, is what I'm trying to say here. Don't ask. So it can't be all me not being interested in opera and classical music. It's something else. And I think it's exactly that. Like, Pratchett does not have such a good grasp of the whole aspect of the classical theater opera house kind of thing compared to rock music and movies. And I think that makes a lot of, like, that makes it very different in a way. Then, another thing that I did not like that much about this one, and I think it's important to mention that, is the witches. Don't get me wrong, I love the witches, I love Nanny Ogg and Granny Weatherwax, and there's still some really cool bits and pieces in here. But, in some way, they feel a bit like, I don't know, overused? Or just like reduced to cliches, where, like, especially Granny Weatherwax used to be a very fascinating character in a lot of ways. In this one, she's not so much. A lot of it feels like Pratchett, like, falling back on stuff that worked before and just reusing it, like, turning Grebo into a human being again. Yeah, we've done that before. In Witches Abroad. Nanny Ogg is just about, making comments with, sexual content. And yeah, that's fun, but I don't know. I just felt that the dynamic between those two, Nanny Ogg and Granny Weatherwax, didn't work as well here as it did in earlier books. And it felt almost like Terry Pratchett is a bit maybe exhausted by it. And just going through the motions in that regard. The whole, like, traveling on the on the mail coach kind of thing did, I don't know, not feel that, not that inspired in a lot of ways. I think inspiration is what's lacking in this one overall. So there's that. The same kind of goes for a lot of the stuff that is happening in the opera house. The characters just didn't work that well this time around. Agnes is a very fascinating character in her own right. We met her first in the last witch book, in which Lords and Ladies, where she's one of the circle of younger witches, and then she goes away to find herself. And there's a bunch of interesting things here that Pratchett is trying to do and maybe not succeeding in. And one of them is certainly how to deal with body image. Because we know that Agnes is, not to put too fine a point on it, pretty overweight. And a lot of the book is about how people react to overweight people. By which it's like she's always reduced on, to being someone with a nice character. She has a very nice character and great hair. And so I do appreciate the way Pratchett is approaching this. It's easy to call, like, some jokes in there as, fat jokes or whatever, but Pratchett does show that he has a certain sensitivity to how we as a society deal with people that are not conventionally attractive, and how we, try to find ways to, talk around that and ignore it in a way. And that I think is pretty cool as an idea, because we, like, if we're not, like, outright nasty to people, it's just often very easy that we just, like, don't mention it and we ignore it or whatever, instead of engaging with, people about specific things. The same goes for the other character there that I think is interesting, that is Walter Plinge, who is, well, it's hard to say what he really is. Everyone takes him for being very simple. There's certainly a specific approach to, like, mental illness in here that I think is interesting, which is, well, it goes beyond, say, the treatment of madness in something like The Wheel of Time, for example, where madness is just people going mad or hearing voices. No, Walter Plinge, as someone who knows all kinds of things but has a is taken by everyone as being very simple or like, not very intelligent, to put it put it mildly, is an interesting idea of a character. And I think it's interesting to see how Pratchett tries to play with that. Now, his answer that, like Granny Weatherwax just, tells him that he has to wear the mask after, has to wear his mask under the skin as, like, to give him some sort of confidence there. I think that's, I don't know, a bit simplistic, but then again, it's the early 2000s, and we definitely had a different approach to late 90s, early 2000s. We had a different approach to mental health in the 90s and early 2000s compared to what we have now, and I can't fault Pratchett for doing it that way. I think that's okay. There's other bits and pieces in here that I obviously enjoyed. Having the orangutan, everyone's favorite librarian and organ player, show up again is obviously cool. The subplot with Nanny's cookbook is pretty funny. The joy of snacks is... I like that idea, and the recipes are also pretty funny. That, the famous carrot and oyster pie. That bit is pretty funny. And I think there is obviously commentary in this book on how we value art, how we pay for art or don't pay for art. There is a commentary here that I think is important. It just doesn't feel as poignant as the comments on, financing music and movies in moving pictures and soul music felt. Having the opera house being bought by like an older like businessman who thinks he knows what opera is all about and puts money in, but also kind of wants to make money out of it. I mean, yeah. We've seen the idea of rich people buying, things that they love, like football clubs. By football, I obviously mean like the correct kind of football, which is soccer for some of those people out there in the US. That stuff. Like, we have seen that happen. We have seen rich people buying museums, opera house. It's something that, if you were a Russian oligarch before the war, you might do. And the interesting question there is there like a moral problem with that kind of stuff or not? Or is the problem that the person is super rich to start with, or is the problem that they try to mingle in something they don't understand and think that the fact that they are like successful businessmen means they're successful at every sort of business, or maybe just at the one that they are doing? I think that's an interesting comment to be made, especially when you compare it to the fact that like publishers apparently in the Discworld, also make a lot of money and don't pay their authors really well. I think there's a comment there as well, how at the end of the day we still undervalue art, don't pay it the way it should be paid, and have people deal with it that don't understand it. And I think that's a valuable point to make. Up to a point. And the fact that, artists are apparently bad at doing money things is something of a cliche, and I think it's sometimes a bit overused, also in this book, so I don't know, it just didn't feel that developed or that, like, explored as it could have been in a lot of ways. And then Pratchett just goes and focuses too much on the who's the ghost thing and parodying the Phantom of the Opera. Now, I have not read the novel by Gaston Leroux. That may be one of the issues that I have with this book, that I don't get a bunch of inside jokes about the book that I don't, have not read. Now, the idea or last comment that basically they start doing like musicals instead of opera, classical opera, to make actual money, by having the thing like less over the top and more like easily marketable to a larger audience, is it comes across as a bit like elitist. The idea is like, opera is, you will only get like 20 people for opera, but you get like thousands for something simple like a musical. It's like, I don't know. Comes across as slightly arrogant. As I It may be true that, well, musicals are more accessible and more marketable. It always feels a bit like, yeah, the masses are not smart enough to understand opera. And I didn't like that aspect. However, and this is like something that I think is important here, is Terry Pratchett is very good always when it comes to observing and portraying class, mostly economic class, and how people try to be part of one or the other. There's that one short subplot with two, like a young clerk or young lawyer, I think something like that, taking his mother to the opera house because he comes from like a lower class background and is trying to make his way up, and he has the money now, and now he's trying to fit into that society. And that part is, for me, one of the strongest subplots or bits in this book. Because it's the thing where we can actually once again feel Pratchett caring. Pratchett cares a lot about the idea of having class, and that being a problem. The idea of having like rituals that you can only, like being in that in-group that is all about money, but also about like being part of that specific group of people for a long time, and being very exclusive towards new people. And opera as one of the models of distinction that said upper class uses is certainly an important aspect. Like, as I said, I've been to opera houses, and yes, I'm a privileged motherfucker. I come from like a privileged background, so I fit in there. Well, apart from the t-shirts and whatnot, but I can do the opera thing. I can do the upper class intellectual. I can do that. So it's easy for me to see that. But the idea that this is can be very, very tough for people that don't come from that group, that are less privileged, to actually try and break into those circles. And the constant like feeling of inferiority that you try to overcome, and the constant feeling that there's something going on that you don't know because you weren't told from like childhood days up to now. That part works really well because, once again, it's a bit that Pratchett really likes. And maybe his sort of like disinterest or lack of respect or whatever towards the art form of opera comes exactly from that, because he's like, yeah, it's if you see opera, classical music, as a tool for distinction for the upper class, for the privileged groups, then it's very difficult to love it and get into it with the way that soul music did with rock music and moving pictures did with movies. Plus, those were all in the way that Pratchett told the stories. Those two art forms, rock music and movies, are both about dreams, about breaking rules, about breaking the status quo, which is which is apparently negative, right? With like rigid class structures, about rebellion, about trying new things. Opera is not, and thus it makes sense sort of to go to like the musical later on as an art form that is sort of musically, but also sort of operatic, but also at the same time for everyone, and does not require all that background knowledge, all these rituals, all that social capital that you already have as an upper class motherfucker. So yeah, I can see it that way. I just don't think it comes off that well. Probably also because, opera at this point in our Western world is very much a niche thing for very few people, and like no one cares about it anymore. So it doesn't feel as poignant because the point sort of, is mostly lost at this point. Let's get to the last point that I think is important here, and that's a subplot with Enrico Basilica, or Henry Slug, and the idea that we see what we want to see in a lot of ways, which is why, that guy tries to come across as foreign, because No one would take a take an Ankh-Morpork street person seriously as an opera singer, as like a star tenor, so to speak. That would not work. So they have to come from somewhere far away to have that added level of mystique, and you can just pretend at it. Same thing with what's her name, Agnes Perdita, changing her name to come across as more different. Because names matter. The things we think about people matter, which is the overarching, I guess, point on human nature that Pratchett tries to make here is like we care less about who people are than what they pretend to be or what we want to see in people, and that's a problem because we never actually get down to the actual personality. It kind of works, but it's also not exactly a new point or anything. So it doesn't hit. At least for me, it didn't hit that hard. Plus, I really don't like the way he's portraying Christine, the skinny blonde girl that knows that she's skinny and blonde. Because at the end of the day, it's a lot of like blonde, stupid jokes. I don't know. I thought we were over that, and I would have appreciated Terry Pratchett to be being above making that kind of jokes. But then again, I guess it's very difficult to write characters that are, not very intelligent, and to write them in a respectful way in a book that at its core is still a comedy. Because, of course, it's about jokes. So I guess there is that part in it that I think is important to understand. It's like very difficult to do that. But I just did not appreciate that part. I personally, I hated the way I hate the way he's describing Christine as vapid, good looking, and unaware of all the damage she more or less accidentally causes. I did like that description much less, or had more problems with it than I have with the somewhat simplistic treatment of Agnes. Wait. I think an important aspect, however, is a side point that he doesn't make deliberately, is that the body shape thing is sexist, right? Because Enrico Basilica, or Henry Slug, is grossly overweight. And everyone accepts that. No one cares about it, because men can get away with that kind of thing, and women can't. Which is sort of the point that he, as I said, not explicitly makes, but he shows that point once again by focusing on the looks and the physical appearance of Agnes as no longer presentable and whatnot, and ignoring it with Enrico. And that certainly is still a huge problem. The fact that we tend to focus on physical appearance with women and ignore it up to a point with dudes. At least in like a still sort of mainstream, still mostly patriarchal mainstream media. I mean, it has slowly shifted, but it's still far from good. And it was even worse in, the year 2000, or whenever that book came out, like 98 or something. So yeah, let's sum things up. Maskerade is not Terry Pratchett's best work. It deals with the usual Pratchett subjects. It ties all kinds of Pratchett things and Discworld-y things in, which is cool. But unlike some other books that deal with subjects that Terry Pratchett is more emotionally invested in, the whole concept of opera does kind of fall flat in a lot of ways. And only a few of the points really stick home. The plot is solid, but yeah. It's, for the middle period of Discworld writings, it's certainly not a good one. And, that's a bit of a shame, really. Anyway, I don't know what to say about this one. I'll be back with the next one. Feet of Clay, if you want to join us, I'd much appreciate it. Join the Discord server, I'll link it down below. Join the read-along, we'll talk about it next week. And then it's on to greener pastures in the next couple of weeks. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.